Hello and welcome to another episode of Untalented. Today I've got Ioana with me, who is the CCO
Hello.
of MRM. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
No, I'm excited. It's going to be a good chat. I like to start these with a this or that. I think it just warms us up. So chocolate or crisps?
Chocolate.
Okay, thank God. It's on to a good start. Leading or doing?
Doing.
Progressive or innovative?
Innovative.
Photos or videos?
Videos.
Intuition or insights?
Intuition.
Films or books?
Films.
Winter
Lazy.
or summer?
Tough one. Summer.
Okay, yeah. I always find it mental that people say winter because I just hate it so much.
I used to be winter, but I feel like the older I get, not that I'm old, but as I get older, I'm like, I feel like I want summer. Anyway.
Yeah, I just need the sunshine to warm my bones. Cats or dogs?
Dogs. Oh, so much dogs.
Yeah, definitely dogs. Ambition or comfort?
Ambition.
Skill or fame?
Skill.
Nice. Okay, you'll be pleased to
Also,
know
who would say fame? I
Well,
feel like you would be on the spot. Oh, really? Are you
so true.
famous?
And I think it's one of those things, isn't it, where you really think about it, it's fame can come with skill.
That's true.
But yeah, I don't know. We live in an age that everyone's famous just for being famous, right?
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah, and the more I see people who are famous, the more I'm like, no,
Yeah.
I do not want that. I don't want that to be me,
Yeah.
which is mad. But yeah, I mean, the first sort of crucial question that we ask all our guests is, who was the first person to make you feel talented?
It's I think the logical thing would be, well, the first person that hired me, but I don't think it was the person that hired me. I think the first person that saw through my talent was Adrian Boțan, who now leads McCann Europe. He's the chief creative officer. He used to be my boss when I was in Bucharest.
Oh, nice.
And he hired me as a senior writer, and then he saw through me. He promoted me quite fast, and he pushed my limits. So I think he saw through my talent.
Yeah, no, I think it's so often critical to have someone at an early stage in your career almost be like, I know that you can do it before you even know you can do it, and push you to that. It's like that limit and that discomfort level, isn't it, where you actually then become very good type of thing.
I think so. I think you do need to feel it a bit, that you have it in you. I think there's a lot of people who I've met throughout my career that they didn't know they have it in them, and somehow they got left behind.
Yeah,
so I think you do need to feel it in a little bit. You have to trust yourself a little bit. But yes, I agree. It's important that somebody pushes you from the beginning in your career.
Nice.
Yeah.
Hopefully he'll have a little shout out on here as
Oh,
well.
for sure. Who doesn't?
So is that how you first got started in the industry? Tell us how you entered into the lovely world of advertising.
I got in. No, this is not how I got in. I actually got in. What do you want, the short version or the long version?
Whichever version you want.
So I got in quite early. I started working in advertising when I was 19.
Okay.
And it was against odds because I was a very poor student throughout high school and university, and everybody was telling me, you cannot do advertising, it's so tough. And then I got in. I joined J. Walter Thompson back then. I was a writer for a couple years. And I shadowed the CCO at the time. I learned a lot from that.
Yeah.
He took me in studios. I understood how, ads were being produced. I understood a little bit of the grind that comes with advertising. And then I joined McCann, I think 5 years later, when they recruited me as a senior writer for Vodafone.
Okay.
And then you asked me how. Sorry, say that again, because I get diluted sometimes with my thoughts.
No, all good. Just how you first got started.
How I got started. Yeah, I was just wondering if you asked me throughout my career. So that's how I got in. And I think what was interesting when I got in advertising, this was 2006, is that I started to write to a lot of agencies, and nobody really cared. I mean, obviously it was a different time than now, but nobody really cared. Not a lot of CCOs cared. And then what I did, I learned whatever editing program was at the time, something like Movie Maker or whatever Microsoft had at the time.
I love it. You look back now and everyone's like, what?
What was it?
Yeah.
I remember I was doing stuff in Corel Draw and whatever. So I've learned Movie Maker, and I think it was called like that. And I started to basically pull videos from the internet on stuff that I thought advertising is about. And I did this sort of little manifesto of why I want to join advertising. And it was this stupid video. And I sent it to a lot of people. And then the CEO of J. Walter Thompson, she's an Austrian, very tough Austrian, Petra, she put me in touch with the GM and CCOs. And then the rest is history, I guess. And as I said, I shadowed the CCO for like 6 months. And then
yeah, that's amazing. I think it's like so easy to look back and kind of laugh. I've been like, oh my god, I put a video together and I did that, but also it worked.
It did work.
And I think sometimes you kind of need that element of doing something differently and thinking, like having the fire in your belly of thinking, well, I've written to you and you've ignored me, so I'm going to do something else to get your attention.
And you know what, now that we're talking, I just remember like I did this speech like years ago in Bucharest, and it was about CD women in Bucharest or something like that. And it was a similar question. And somehow before that meeting, I looked up my email to J. Walter Thompson, and I found this little poem that I've done as well. And it was so stupid and so self-ironic. And I read it out loud to the whole crowd, and everybody was laughing because it was so ridiculous looking back. But somehow it worked. And I think that sort of self-irony that you prove some sort of humor to the industry, or I don't know, at least some passion to it.
Yeah, that's so true. I think like it's those little personal things that are like clearly hilarious years later, but it shows like who you are rather than just an email of saying, this is what I've done, this is like, can I come and work for you? It's like, give me some insight into you, because at that level we're all like everyone's at the same playing field. Do you know what I mean? Everyone's at the same starting point. So no, I think it's cool. I love that that's how you like entered this weird and wonderful industry. And then in your early career, I think you just sort of touched on it, but you climbed the ranks from junior copywriter to group CD quite quickly. How did you find that? What was that journey like?
First of all, I think it was very intentional. It didn't just happen.
No, of course.
So, and I think that's what I always tell creatives when they ask me, like, oh, you know, what advice would you give me? And I always, it was very intentional. So when I became senior writer in McCann, I was hired for a role for the Vodafone account. And it was a great account, like a brave client. We were doing really good work. The CD at the time was amazing. He now runs the entire McCann office in Bucharest, like amazing. We were doing great work. But then I was looking around, you know, like, okay, let's look at this agency and figure out what accounts in this agency doesn't have a creative director. So one of the accounts was the Coca-Cola company, which to me and to everybody sounded crazy, because like how do they not have a CD? They don't have a CD. The reason why they didn't have a CD was because back in the time, it was an account driven by media. Like obviously when you come from a country like the UK or the US, it sounds crazy, but when you come from a smaller country like Romania, a lot of the stuff is just adaptation work. So you'd get, a TV spot from the UK, let's say, and you'd have to adapt it, and that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
So of course, who the hell wants to do that? But I was like, you know what? I feel like we could do more. So what I did, I always lifted my hand up for projects that nobody wanted. And I always went in front of the client and I always brought something extra. And then slowly, the client asked me to lead the account. So then I became a CD.
I love that.
Yeah, so it was, I mean, obviously everybody trusted me in McCann. I'm not going to, obviously you don't get there if people don't trust you. But because it was very intentional, and I really wanted to get that account because there was nothing else for me to lead. I was like, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do it. Now these days, everybody, like, obviously we don't talk about overtimes as much as we did back in the day, but I did do a lot of overtime by choice. I wanted to do that because I wanted to prove myself within that account and prove that I can lead something.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I think it's also one of those that if you didn't get it and it didn't work, then it's fine. Like, it's the sort of trying element of it that is so important.
Yeah.
I love that. I bet that day when they were like, "Can you lead?" You were like, "Yes."
And I would say it's obviously it's a tango, right? Like the client at the time was a very, very smart client, and they wanted change, and they saw that they can have change, and we sort of transformed the business together. Like, it's not me, it's a team effort, but it was intentional, and that's how I got there.
Nice. I think it's also so nice that it's someone who really wants it, rather than it like being an open job and people interviewing and not really knowing like what the scope is of that or what you can do or what they already do. It's like, actually, I've been in the agency, I know how it works, I've seen the potential of where you guys could be, and I really like want to take you on that journey, which is so cool. And I bet you had such a good relationship with them because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I think having a relationship of trust with your clients is the only way that you can produce great work.
Yeah,
that's why I say that. I think it's a two-way street. You can, there's going to be throughout everyone's careers that are probably accounts that you give it your all and it just doesn't come through. And it's the nature of the business. But they were amazing. They are amazing. So shout out.
Yeah, nice. So like, what do you think your main like takeaways, sort of looking back at it now and that journey and that sort of intention of putting yourself in that position? Is there anything that you kind of reflect on now and think, oh, I still use that in my sort of day-to-day where I am?
I think I do. I think, like these days it's like everybody talks about manifestation, right? Like I think I can hop on and talk about that, but I think I do. I still reflect a lot around where do I want to get, and I think everything that I do is related to where do I want to get. And I think it helps me understand also where I don't want to get.
Which I think is like not spoken about enough. It's always, I don't know, we live in a society and a world where it's always like, think forward, think positive, where do you want to head, what does good look like, what are you excited about? When actually it's like, if you can also visualize what you don't want, it then makes what you do want so much clearer. Type of thing.
Don't ask me what I don't want, because I don't want to I don't want some people to get offended, but there's things in my job that I know I don't want to do, so I'm trying to be very prescriptive about the directions I'm taking. I think it's really important to be aware of it, because I think a lot of people aren't, and a lot of people then end up doing what they don't want to do without really realizing, and then becoming resentful of the fact that they're doing it. So I think it's interesting. And then I was sort of doing some reading about you before you came on, and I think one of the things that was really interesting was that you said you were really passionate about transformational stories and transformational work. Like, can you tell us more about that and explain that? Totally. I think I'll refer back to Coke as well, because I think that's a good example. When I mean transformative stories, is about in that particular case is around how did we transform the creative product for them, like taking it from an account that was just doing adaptation to an account where, even though it was creative work coming from Romania, it was creative work that was recognized globally in award shows. And I think being able to see the transformation of the business and of the output for us as an agency was very rewarding to me. I think when you're able to witness the transformation, everybody grows. You grow, the brand team grows, the brand grows, and it's a really nice payoff. Then I think, when I moved from McCann to run MRM in Bucharest, it was the same thing. Like, how do we make sure that the work that we do is transformative across different clients? When I moved to the US, it was how do we make sure that we transform the way we think about briefs that are mainly film-centric? How do we think beyond? How do we transform businesses? And I think I've carried that with me everywhere I went. It's also the reason why I came back to Europe and to MRM, because I wanted to see, okay, how can we help transform the business of the agency and the business of the clients? And I think I've always been led by that. And unlike when I intentionally decided I wanted to become a CD, this has sort of happened to me. The way that I always operated, I've realized that it was always a bit around transformation. And it's not easy though. When I draw the line, I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? Why am I just not going in a place that it's, everything's laid out for me and I'm just going on the field and playing, So, but it's always been like that a little bit.
Nice. I think as well, like, even when you look back at that journey of intention of being a CD, you saw the scope of transformation in that client. So it actually is probably like even rooted further back from that.
Absolutely.
And it like ties into that more sort of commerciality element of it as well. And I think I was talking to someone about this a couple of weeks ago of like, creatives can get a bad name for being too commercial, when in fact it's like, actually, but our job is to sell things, and
agree more.
yeah, is such a key thing of that. And I think there needs to like hopefully be a bit of a shift of you're allowed to think commercially, because actually then the creative is probably going to be better from it.
I think you should think commercially.
Yeah, I think that so many people don't, and I think it's a lack of training and like a lack of that being sort of wide and networked and like understood. But and then I think, well, that transformational side of it is about how do we grow not only the creative but the commercial value of your brand.
Absolutely. We do creative work that needs to sell. That's what we need to do. And I think it's important for the future of our industry as well, that we're not just creating art. We're not here to create art. We're here to do great creative work that sells. Essentially, that's our mission.
Yeah, and hopefully some great art is a byproduct of that.
Absolutely.
As well. Yeah. Nice. So now you're in a leadership role. So like, has there been any key factors in your career that have really like helped you feel sort of supported and ready to be in a leadership position?
It's I'm sure a lot of creative directors have said this, that being a writer is very different than being a creative director. Honestly, I don't know that there was something that happened that prepared me for it. You just learn. It's very empirical. I think for me, it wasn't. I became a creative director very early. Back in the day, at least, it was very early. I think today is not so normal to see a CD at 26. I think I've seen quite a few and much more talented than I was. So, but back in the day, it was not so usual. And when I became a CD, the people that were reporting into me were way, 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 way older than me. And I think because of that, there was always a little bit of age bias. And then as I grew into the role and I was leading the work for Central Europe for Coke, I started, because I'm Romanian, in Europe there's some geography bias. And I started to feel that as well. And I think going through all these hurdles early on helped me to become more thick-skinned, I guess.
Yeah.
And be better prepared for tough conversations and be able to stand up for myself, which I think is very important. And I find that now as a CCO and as a woman CCO, that you need to stand ground. And I think a little bit of that heritage that I grew too fast in a country that was poorly seen across Europe helped me quite a bit.
Yeah, for sure. I was just about to say, I think there's the age bias, but then also, well, how did you find that being a woman as well? And I think it's so easy for people to see young men as remarkable and smart and everything like that, and to kind of expect them to be in that role even though they're young. But I think for women it's different, and obviously it shouldn't be different, and it's crap that it is, but I do think that it like ebbs and flows into the age bias as well. As like, did you find that at all, sort of bias of being a female?
It's really interesting. When I was a CD, even in ECD, I haven't, like maybe ECD, the more, I think the more you grow, the more you start to feel the bias in leadership. Or I was very lucky. I don't want to generalize it. But as a CD, I was McCann it was very, and Adrian, who was running McCann, was very much around meritocracy. And I have never felt ever that it's about sexes or age. When I was at CD level, that was not an issue. And I would hear about these issues around the industry, and I was like, I don't understand. I've never faced this. Like, is this for real? But then the more you grow into a leadership role, the less women you see.
Yeah. And
the more you realize that there is a huge gap, huge gap. And so I guess to answer your question, in the beginning, I haven't felt the bias. I think moving forward, you start to feel alone.
Yeah.
It's still an industry that is, especially in the creative side, that it's run by men, and you see it. You can't be blind.
Yeah, so, of course. I think it's like the old saying, isn't it? Like, it's lonely at the top. And it's really interesting how many female leaders I speak to who say the same thing.
Yeah.
And there's like such a disconnect of almost like networking, even though it's an industry where you would think it would be the opposite. How do you navigate that and navigate being a female leader?
As I said, I think you have to be a bit thick-skinned. I think, everybody talks about women lead with more empathy, and I don't know that I lead with empathy. I honestly, if you'd ask me what's my leadership style, I don't know. I just push for good work. I think you do your best. Honestly, you do your best every day and try to navigate it. And I think we just need to support and push one another. I think I've become more vocal and more passionate about pushing other female creative leaders. And I think one of the, and again, I'm talking about creative fields, but I think there's a lot of, there's a big conversation around numbers, like that we are equal in numbers, women and men, or minorities, or LGBTQ, in different networks. But I think a lot of women still report into men. So we can talk about numbers, but when it comes to equity and position of power, we are still highly unequal. So I think that's what we still need to work on as an industry. And I think myself and all the women in the C-suite, we need to push for that. We need to push for, if you have a woman ECD that is great, promote her.
Yeah, for sure.
Don't just keep her as an ECD to make the numbers. And I think that's super, super important. Because I got tired of hearing that, we would hire women, but there's not so many out there. There are. I can name you a lot of women that are really, really smart. I can name you a lot of CDs and ECDs that are way smarter than me, and they should deserve a good position. So I think it's just, let's open up. Let's put all the cards on the table and talk about the elephant in the room.
Yeah, it's just like an easy way out, isn't it? Like, of course, there may be less, but also, are you looking in the right places?
Yeah.
Are you empowering those people to get in touch and to apply and to want to talk to you?
Yeah.
Like, I think it is, and the industry is never going to thrive unless people sort of open up, like, even 5 degrees more of what they would consider for that role type of thing. And I think it's interesting what you said about, even though we are now at like equal numbers, and it is a much more diverse industry, which is amazing, but you're then still reporting into the same people, and actually the people that are making the decisions and sort of paving the way and having those conversations are still the same. So there's still a massive disconnect between the sort of like day-to-day workforce and then the people at the top.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had that chat with someone the other week, and do you know when you have like an epiphany moment of being like, oh yeah, you could have like the most diverse agency ever in the sort of workforce element and the hands-on element, but if the leadership say something, then that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. And I think we see a lot of change in many networks. So I'm positive about the momentum, but I think, again, as women, we need to become vocal. And I think there is an element of fear to being vocal, and I understand that, but I think we need to talk about it.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's exciting to speak with people who are being vocal about it and who are open about it. And I think actually it's, like you said, it's that chance of, when you're in that position, use your position to help other people succeed and thrive and almost be recognized in it.
You have to.
For sure. So how have you found that, like, because obviously you've worked quite globally in different places. Have you found that has been a common theme, or like the lack of women at the top?
Interesting question. You know what? If we're just talking advertising, probably yes.
Okay.
If we're talking across industry, probably no. So because I remember I've read this stat one time about Central Europe, like we are paving the way in women executive leadership, but that's across several industries. I don't know if it's true for just advertising. I've disconnected a bit from who leads what in which agency, but I think overall, I don't think it's a country specific thing. I think overall we just need to do better in any country that I've been. I've seen it. Yeah.
What was have you had different sort of learnings from your time in the UK, well, in wider Europe, in the US? What's been your main sort of takeaways of exploring those different markets?
It was really a journey. I feel like every country that I've been in does creative work differently. Like and I think this is true for a lot of countries that are smaller. Like in Romania, I've learned the skill of doing innovative activation kind of work, sort of challenging channels and just having a bit of lateral thinking, because as a country, you have to get creative with the way you produce things, because you don't have budgets to produce, you don't have budgets for media, you don't have budgets for anything. So you got to get creative. It's important, otherwise you can't survive.
Yeah.
So I've learned that. When I moved to the States, I've learned the art of storytelling and the art of craft and entertainment, which I thought it was so interesting. I've also discovered that it was very different from, like, the creative teams would think very different about creative work than I used to be, that I was used to in Romania, because we were very lateral thinking. And then I went to the States and it was like, big production, let's get this celebrity. I was like, wait, well, there's other ways you could do it.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting to have this sort of clash between thinking of, the way they were looking at the work and the way I was looking at the work, and then creating this sort of symbiosis between the two genres. And I think that was great for us in the work, and that's how we've created successful work, or at least my team at BBDO at the time. In the UK, it's interesting. I think I thought I've only seen this in the US, because US was very, whenever I was talking about advertising, it was very like country focused. It was just about the US, and they didn't know a lot of advertising from abroad. I find the same about the UK.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like
okay.
every time people reference work, it's work from the UK. And I was like, wait, I didn't see that ad. What is that ad? And I searched for it. So I think it's interesting, because they're a big country, because the UK is a big country, the United States is a big country. I think it's very like here, like very self-centered. And I think being more open about, maybe work from other continents, or just trying to open up. I think that's the one thing that I've noticed. And then it's also like same like genre, like in Romania and in Central Europe in general. Like if you see film, and again, maybe it's not true anymore, but back a few years ago, when you would look at the film, it was quite heavy. Like we're still trying to make it work, and it's part of our cultural heritage. It's very like, let's do it together, we can change the world. And then you go to the States, and it's like everybody's having fun. It's like a Saturday Night Live, it's like Skittles, and then you move to the UK, and UK is a bit more balanced, and it's self-ironic in the way you do things. And it's really interesting. You can see in the craft of film a little bit of the culture, and like the macro, like the overall culture. So anyway, those were some of the takeaways. And yeah,
that's so interesting. I think like in the UK, it's like a very specific humor and wit, and almost like self-deprecating. And I think it's hilarious that as a whole nation, everyone relates to that. And you kind of look at us and you're like, why? Like, are we all okay? What's going on? But it's just what's been like bred into us. And then I think it's really cool that you got to work with a team in the US and actually help them think wider as well, and help them, because it's so easy to get caught up in your bubble. And if you've always started in that space, of course you're always going to think like that, and you're also then always going to think that everywhere else in advertising is the same. So I bet that they were like, wow, we would have never ever thought of half of like this stuff, or even being exposed to it.
I don't know.
Type of thing, which I think is really cool. And then like throughout your career, you've been really highly awarded, which is amazing and sort of testament to the great work. But I always love asking the question of, has there been a particular piece of work or campaign throughout your career that you just like hold dear, like you absolutely love, or you love the process of it or the outcome, just like that one that you always think back to, have been like, yeah, that was pretty good?
I have a few, as you can imagine.
Yeah, but, such a hard question. Sorry.
No, it is a hard question, and I have to choose one, right?
Maybe allowed two.
All right. Well, I'm not going to choose the most, like I think the most, like, when we've done Gun Survivor reviews, which was heavily awarded, it's the why it's dear to my heart. It's because it was so, and in general, I think all the ideas I'll mention have to do with the process. It was such a big hurdle to get it over the finish line, because it was such a delicate subject. We were going against an industry that was promoting guns to get them to promote, safe storage of guns. So it was quite hard, and there were many times that I had to not tell my team that most likely we're not going to be able to do the campaign, and I haven't.
Yeah.
And I kept telling them, like, keep pushing, we're going to do it until we've done it. But because of it, like, I think it will always play a dear role in my heart. But leaving that aside, I will say one that wasn't so worded, but it's really dear to me, and it was done for Raid, which is it's a mosquito repellent and insecticide for S.C. Johnson. And Fisk Johnson, he's part of the Johnson family, and he's also a brilliant scientist, and he's very passionate about everything that has to do with the eradication of malaria around the world. We've done a lot of campaigns around it. Just this year, one of the campaigns won in Cannes as well. But this campaign I'm going to talk about was about getting Fisk Johnson, who's like this, an amazing guy, but the millionaire and the heir to the Fisk Johnson to the S.C. Johnson empire, to sit for one night in Rwanda on a chair and be a human bait for mosquitoes carrying malaria. So he just basically risked his life to raise awareness that this is the way that some research is being done in West Africa, and to raise funds and raise attention of the need for eradication of malaria and the efforts that S.C. Johnson is doing. But just that process, when I remember, like, we were talking, I hope we don't, something doesn't happen to him.
I hope he's
okay. So and it was like, he was amazing. So I always hold dear to my heart. It won some awards, not huge amount of awards, and what I always appreciated about S.C. Johnson is that they don't go out and just like chest bump themselves and say, this is what we've done.
Yeah.
They're always very discreet about their actions, and it was just extraordinary to see what Fisk Johnson has been doing. So yeah,
I love that. And I think it's kind of when you look back and you think, I can't believe that we got that person to do that. Yes. But it's like you're also invested in this cause and in like raising that awareness and doing it. But I imagine the fear of all you guys been like, I hope he's okay. I hope we're not really putting him in danger, which is hilarious. And I love to ask that question because I think it's so easy for creatives to see like a polished, finished article and see it winning loads of awards and see it getting famed. But it's like, actually, we had to really push for that, and we had to like navigate a tricky process and tricky situation on doing that. And I think it's so nice to sort of see under the skin of it. And I always I just find it so interesting to find out which ones people love, because they always have like one that's super famous and everyone knows about, and then like one like your mosquito one that is like, oh, I would have never probably known about that if not. But it's really cool. And so like thinking of the sort of next generation of creative and agencies and advertising, do you think how do you think agencies are going to have to differentiate themselves in the sort of next 5 to 10 years?
It's a very tough question. I mean, I think maybe I'm optimistic, but I feel like obviously AI is here. It's not a buzzword. It's a thing, and I think agencies who ignore it, they're just damaging themselves. I think AI is here to take some of the jobs that honestly as creatives you don't want to do, and be able to allow for time for the big ideas. So I think optimistically, I think that the way like agencies will thrive on great narratives, on great big ideas, on the craft of the film or the craft of the ideas that you can't really achieve through AI. I think that's it. I think the power of human creativity will still be here. It's about how we're going to be able to use the tools that are given to us. And I think that's important for creatives. Like if you haven't already started to use Runway or Midjourney or you name it, well, you're already late. Start doing it. I think you can't deny it. Like you already have, testing companies who are doing generative AI to test. You have, Runway is doing a whole competition on film craft on AI. Like I bet you that in a year from now, you'll see it in award shows. You'll have a category for it. So it's like, you can't really ignore it. I think agencies who ignore it will disappear.
Yeah, it is the evolve or die whole thing, isn't it? And I think there's been so much fear of it's going to take our jobs, it's going to take our industry, but it's a prompt, and it's about how you then utilize it, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Have you found that you've been using it quite a lot in your creative?
Absolutely. I think we've been using it quite a bit on, especially in ideation stage, and sort of and in storyboarding and everything that makes comps easier. We've used it quite a bit. I used Runway quite a bit, even in like creating mood videos. So it's quite interesting. I actually really like it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the creatives that in my team really use it. And the thing is now it becomes annoying that you immediately know what's AI, and I think, okay, it's just the technology needs to get better, because it's clearly, we'll get there. I always make this joke that there's a lot of the networks, there's very little you achieve in 6 months from a process perspective in a network. But then you look at OpenAI and generative AI when they started, and then in 6 months where they've got. So I think we need to do better. And I think, you asked, what's going to differentiate. I think agility will differentiate a lot.
Yeah.
And being choiceful about where you have to be agile and where you don't. Because I think that's another thing, right? Like there's a lot of brands and clients want agility, but I think there's certain things that you have to give time for craft and for thinking and for I think making that choice on where you're agile and where you have to really put some deep thinking into it is going to be important.
Yeah, no, I think as well, like for big networks, they kind of just say no about agility because it's like, well, we're super big, it won't work. But yeah, that's bang on.
I think I disagree. I think a lot of networks say yes. Okay. I think not all networks deliver, because I think we're all aware that we need to be agile, but who's gonna do it better?
Yeah, how?
I think that's the important part.
Yeah, I think it's really important of the thinking of where, like you said, where can we afford to do this?
Yeah.
And where is it actually gonna be useful and be beneficial? Because you don't want to, like you say, promise to do it and then not deliver, and then everyone's like, well, we said that we were going to do this. So yeah, I think that's really
it needs to be agility in the service of work, right? Like I think be agile if it use AI if it makes sense to use AI, if it makes sense to deploy fast. But if you're trying to do a Super Bowl ad, maybe don't give it 2 weeks. You know what I mean? Like I think we're looking at agility in the wrong way sometimes. Like not everything should be done very fast.
Yeah, I think a lot of places sort of like with the AI thing, it's like, well, it's here, so we'll use it for everything. It's like, no, use it where it's going to make sense to.
And it rewired us.
Yeah.
It's like, well, if technology can do it so fast, you can too. But not everything.
Yeah, and I think that's as well where people kind of need to realize, well, it's not going to take our jobs. Because it can't do that like crafted side of it, or yeah, let's pray. We would both be not feeling good after that. But yeah, it won't do that crafted element of it, and that's why you're here, and that's why you're in that role, which is interesting. Do you think that there's any sort of key qualities and skills that the like junior creatives entering the industry should really harness now?
Well, AI for sure. I actually think it's harder now to join the industry. First of all, you have to want to join the industry, and then I think agencies are looking for. And I'm not saying if it's the right way or wrong, but they're looking for people who sort of master different skills. Maybe stuffing. And I think that's so native to the new creatives. Like a lot of them will know a little bit of Midjourney. They'll know a little bit of editing. They'll know a little bit. They're more, at least from how I was just a writer. But I think right now the new generation of creative, they're just a little bit more multi-skilled, I guess. And I think bringing that to the game, whatever that extra skill is, will always set you apart. Yeah, I think the industry needs a bit of a breath of fresh air, and these sort of unicorns are always hard to find. So whatever you have it's your thing, bring it to the table. We love, I'm going back to the letter that I wrote, which was a stupid thing. But I think whatever is that thing that you have and you own, show it, because I think it will make a difference.
Yeah, it's like we said, like that element of being able to stand out and be a bit different. And I think as well, like where we're at with social media and that side of things and content creating, like it's it's now so much easier to learn those skills and be exposed to those skills anyway. I think sort of when social media wasn't really where it's at now, it's like, well, I could never do that. I'd have to go and do a course. And whereas you've got like kids making seamless TikToks and you're thinking, how on earth are you doing this? So it's like actually harness that and bring that to the table.
We used to have at BBDO, we used to have we built a team it was for social media, and we had cinematographers and musicians. Well, they still have it, still there, but when I was there, and one of the guys who was an editor, he was also a musician. He was composing music on his own time, and he had 1 million followers on TikTok. Whoa. It was just mental. And then at one point we had a campaign, and we actually proposed him as a sort of an influencer to do the work for a client. So it was really interesting. Like I love that about a lot of creatives are like, oh yeah, I actually have 1 million followers. I was like, what are you talking about?
It's mad, isn't it?
It's mad. It's amazing.
Especially because you just know them as them.
Yeah.
And then you like, it always feels strange to watch then their content and be like, oh my God, you're like my colleague or whatever. And actually you're super famous and loads of people know you. But how like unreal that you then got to suggest him as a talent.
I think you do. You have to push them, right? Like I think he's great, and I think it made sense at the time for it was. I don't remember what it was for, but he was very talented. He was composing stuff and he was showing up on Billboard. I was like, okay, well, if it's unfair, you know what I mean? Like, I think you should be promoted.
For sure. You made a comment just then about actually wanting to be in the industry. Do you think it's less desirable now than it once was?
I think there's more competition to the industry in terms of coolness. You know, like obviously tech industry is an industry. As if I would start today and I would look at the world and I was like, okay, what do I want to do? Probably I would say tech, right? Because it's such it's a sexy industry. There's a lot of benefits to it. The world talks about it a lot. You see they're changing the world fast. So I think it's that. I don't know that. I think it's not as sexy as it used to be, advertising, and I think we have to make it again. And I think it has to do with the work that we do. I think we need to do work that has an impact. And I go back to your point about commerciality. I think we've reached, because people see everything everywhere. They're sick of advertising.
Yeah.
They're just sick of it. You know, it's not like back in the day you would open the TV and it would be like entertaining, and then you'd have a series every now and then. It's just advertising everywhere. And I think we need to up our game to still be relevant. And then now we're also like, advertising is competing with everything, like entertainers, music, tech, startups. You know, if I would start again, like if I was a young woman again, well, not that I'm old again, but like if I would be 18 again and trying to look into the industry, I don't know if it would be my first choice.
Interesting. Yeah. We are bombarded with it at all times, and then it's the competition of, well, how do we make this relevant, and how do we make it interesting, how do we make it cool, but then also how do we still sell things, which I think is that like just juxtaposition of actually the commerciality side of it again, isn't it? It's like we can't just make an ad because it's cool and because people find it entertaining. Like if we could, it'd be
I think amazing, it needs to be entertaining. I think it needs to be entertaining. And don't get me wrong, I love advertising. I every interview that I give is like, I love this job. I don't know anything else to do, and I've been passionate about it since day one. I just think we need to have better impact. We need to do work that really stands out. We really need to push ourselves. It's just about that. I think to some degree and it's not, it's everything that's going on around us. But I think to some degree at parts we've become complacent to doing things in a certain way. And I think we just need to push ourselves more.
Yeah, I think it goes back to, like you said, the start of your career when you were always having to push, and like you couldn't be complacent in, oh, well, we get a brief and we just do a TV ad and we just approach it in this way. It's like you have to always think about what's new and what's progressive and what's interesting, which, it probably does loop back when you think about it. Been like, oh, yeah, that's what I was always having to do because we weren't spoiled by the massive budgets and the massive briefs. at this point, I always ask people to bring something to the table that they hate, and I always find it so intriguing. So please, the floor is yours.
Anything that I hate. I didn't know that I hate this, but I realized it when I was in the States. I hate people in elevators that don't say hello. And maybe it's a small town girl kind of thing, but it's like if I walk into an elevator and I say hello, say hello. And then it took me a while in the States. I was like, it took me a while to understand why people don't say hello in elevators, even if it's just you and them, because they live in elevators, like just waiting for an elevator to come from the 70th floor down and then go up. Like you get bored of it. It's like taking a bus. You don't say hello to everyone in the bus. But still, I hate it. So when I walk into an elevator, a small town girl will always say hello. And I expect a hello back, but nobody gives it to me. So
that is amazing. I have never heard that ever. I love that, because it's now made me think, because it's always awkward that people don't speak in them, but also you then feel more awkward if you say something.
Absolutely. I'm the most awkward person in the elevator.
I can imagine you in the big elevators in like the US just stood there thinking, I wish I never said that. Why did I do that? Did you say hello as people came in on different, like,
no. No, because by the time you reach like the 30th floor, you become one of them. It doesn't matter.
That's so funny. Yeah, there's always that awkward small talk, isn't there?
Yeah.
I've been like, hi, like, wait for the doors. That's hilarious. I love that one. And now every time I go in an elevator, I'm going to think of that and think of you saying hello, and it's going to just make me laugh every time. But no, thank you so much for joining us. I've absolutely loved the chat, and yeah, speak soon.
Thank you. Yes.